Hello.
Hello.
We are in season 2. We made it all the way through season 1, and what an exciting way to launch this new season. Today we have, I think, a lady that I have quietly watched and whose journey that has really inspired. I look forward to those quotes that you post in between your posts.
Thank you.
And it's really just an honor to sit here with you today. Today we're talking about the art of winemaking. I've got Ingrid Best in the studio.
Hello.
She hails all the way from LA, and I think, as we typically do, if you didn't catch our first season, it's customary that I introduce myself. My name is Buyi Mafoko. I'm a seasoned entrepreneur, luxury consultant, as well as a speaker, really setting out to contribute to Africa's luxury growth. And I think this conversation we're going to get into today really embodies the heart of the work that we set out to do. Africa on Luxury is a luxury education platform, and what we're doing here is really just chronicling the story of luxury and drawing context from creators like yourself, tastemakers like yourself, to really just lead with education of the things that define and shape how African luxury is unique from the rest of the world. We embark on having really culturally rich conversations and seeking to explore, inform, as well as to create a unique definition for African luxury. To some, it may be controversial because they don't want to separate luxury from the term African luxury. And I think at this point, even when I was speaking to Laduma, we established that it's just luxury at this point.
Luxury.
Yeah. So on this episode today, we're talking about the art of winemaking.
Yes.
How are you doing, Ms. Best?
I'm wonderful. I'm blessed. I'm grateful. I am full. And I'm ready.
You're ready. What are you ready for?
I'm ready to keep going. I'm ready to receive just the abundance that I know the year ahead of us has.
Love, same.
Yeah, and I'm also ready to celebrate the year we just made it through. I think there's something to making sure that you take a second to celebrate that you survived, that you created, that you influenced,
that you moved in your gift.
And so I'm in this place of, I want to celebrate. I want to pause and celebrate. And I'm ready to continue to build and grow. And I'm full.
You're full.
Yeah, my spirit is really full.
I hope it overflows.
It's overflowing.
And we just spoke about this, how you're looking forward to getting back to your son as well as your grandson, Noah.
Yeah.
So let me formally introduce my guest today. Ingrid Best is a multi-hyphenate businesswoman rewriting the art of winemaking. Raised a stone throw away from the Napa Valley wine region in California, and a career spanning over 2 decades, as young as she looks, in the wine and spirits industry, IBest Wines was an inevitable creation. Growing from the travels and life-changing business trip to South Africa, and we're recording this episode from South Africa.
Yes, we are.
Ingrid was inspired to create her own wine brand, which appeals to the modern-day wine drinker who desires new, dynamic, and diverse and global wines. And we'll get into a little bit more of that and the story of how the wine was launched. I can't believe you're only just over a year in. Launched in October 2023. IBest currently offers 2 award-winning blends, a red and a white, and we'll talk and we'll test the product and do all of that in this episode. Blending art, wine, and culture. The vision for IBest is not only to bring excellent wine to the US market, but also to share the stories and experiences of South African business owners and creative. Ingrid and her team of 6 Black and brown women, darling.
Yes.
All holding equity in the company, are changing the way the wine industry looks, feels, talks, and tastes. Offering a portfolio of fine wines for the perfect wine drinker that is either emerging or very established. I love this. Her vision for IBest Wines is not only to bring there goes my iPad, because technology. But her vision is also to share stories and experiences just around how wine, art, and culture connect. Some career milestones, it would be amiss for me not to mention these. Prior to founding IBest Wines, Ingrid's career was filled with brand building and culture shifting moments, including her work on Ciroc, Bacardi, Moet Hennessy, as well as Diageo. She's a bold advocate for Black and Brown women to hold positions and space at every level of business, something that I think is a passion that I share, from assistants to all the way to C-suite executives. Her dedication to the arts is also exemplified through the efforts of collecting, donating, lending artworks to prestigious institutions, as well as, I think she's also part of the directors at LACMA, which is the Los Angeles County Museum of Art.
Yes.
Okay, now that the English is out the way.
That made me sound great. I
Yeah,
love
you
it.
are great, girl. You are great. And I think, I never want to take away the story of an entrepreneur because it's so dynamic.
Yeah.
And I always take this moment just to make sure that we give the flowers.
Thank you.
So I think congratulations on everything that you've achieved already. And just preparing for this interview, I learned so much because you consume wine, but you never really study and get to understand the business of wine. And I know you said you're not a winemaker. You're a wine what? Negotiant. I couldn't pronounce it. I Googled. I was like Siriing it, everything. So to get into it, viniculture is the cultivation of grapes for winemaking, an age-old craft that complements many other processes that occur in a vineyard, such as harvesting. South Africa is home, and this is an interesting story that I want to get into, just around how you landed on South Africa as your wine region of choice. South Africa is home to the Cape wine region, which benefits from the Mediterranean climate that also gives ideal conditions for the wine grape to thrive in. The South African wine industry is itself a key player in the global landscape, and with exports reaching over 300 million liters in 2023 and an annual harvest of over 900 million liters, if you can count that high, of which 83.9% were used for wine. The climate, terrain, and soil quality in which the grapes are grown all have a major influence on how the wine turns out. Now, I'm not the expert in the room. I'm really just a student in this conversation. And Ingrid, you have over a 2-decade career in the wine and spirits industry. How did you make the transition from corporate? Because, I mean, you've worked really just around about like the pinnacle of the wine and spirits industry and brands. How did you make the transition to becoming, from corporate to becoming a wine negotiant?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's so good to be here. And I'm so glad we're not doing this like on Zoom. I'm in LA, you're here in Johannesburg. I'm here.
Never that.
Yeah, and it feels so good to be sitting across from you. So thank you.
It's a pleasure.
And I love this conversation we're about to have. And I think the question around how did I make the transition from being an executive, working for 3 of the major suppliers in the world, and then taking a very big bet on myself, was really courage. You know, I always say that IBest Wines had been in my head and my heart for years, but I don't know if I had the courage, right? You entrepreneurs have a lot of courage.
Oh, girl.
And I think with age comes wisdom and comes courage. And so, you know, for me, it was that moment where I just said, I've been doing this at the highest level for everyone else. I do it with excellence. I have an impeccable reputation. I do it from a place of purpose. And now is my time to really unlock this thing that's been in my head and my heart, which was IBest Wines. And the interesting thing you mentioned, I grew up in the Bay Area. So I grew up in San Francisco, Oakland. That's 30 minutes away from Napa
Valley.
one of the biggest and well-known wine regions in the world.
Right.
And the truth is, when I first was thinking about launching my own brand, I was like, oh, I'll just launch a wine from Napa. But the moment I discovered the South African wine region and spent time and really just understood how underrepresented South African wine is in the US specifically. The rest of the world knows about South African wine and celebrates it, and you can find it more readily.
Right.
For me, when I did the research in the US, I felt like there was this gap, this huge gap between, some of the other wine regions that are boldly represented, and then South Africa. And then when I dug a little bit deeper in that research, I couldn't understand why, because it's an award-winning wine region that's been producing wine for over 300 years. And so, in pure Ingrid fashion, I was like, here's the unlock. Here's where purpose kind of meets courage, meets craftsmanship. And what I did first was I came here. I spent time here. It wasn't like I just landed on I'm going to launch from South Africa. I spent a couple of years doing harvests here, getting to know winemakers, and also talking to people in the community and saying, like, what do you think about a Black woman from America touting this story of the South African wine region? Because I certainly didn't discover it.
Right.
It's been around, and I don't want to come off like I did. And everyone I spoke to in my community here was like, please do it. We need this bullishness around the story of this region. And so that's really how I landed. In my mind, it was a really disruptive way for me to launch my brand, but also doing it with an award-winning region.
Yeah.
Beautiful wines coming out of South Africa. For wine collectors, South African wines are in their collections.
Yes.
Just like for art collectors, South African artists are in their collection. And so I believe that the South African wine region is in a renaissance and will have a renaissance, like many of the regions that we're familiar with. And I feel so blessed to be a part of, to be visionary enough.
Yeah, like pioneering.
Yeah, be visionary enough to say, I'm willing to do this. And it's hard. Don't get me wrong. I've had people say, are you crazy? South Africa, it's so far. How are you doing that? And, to whom much is given, much is required. And I know that. And so that's how I landed on South Africa. It was really, I feel like it's destiny.
Okay.
I feel like some things are just your destiny. And this is my destiny.
A couple of things that you've said there, and first of all, I missed this telling how beautiful you are.
Oh, thank you.
So I just want to say, like, you speak with such grace and just are a beautiful woman.
Thank you.
And a couple of things stand out for me in what you've just said, just around purpose, destiny, and probably divine timing.
Yeah.
Being key to that. And also just betting on yourself and the courage. So, I mean, what has been, if you can just expand a little bit more, what has been the journey of starting this wine? So from when you visited the wine region, what was the process? What was the timeline? You said you spent a couple of harvest seasons here. What did that look like?
Yeah, so I think for me, I became a student. So even after 20 years of being in the industry, and in some instances feeling like I knew everything there was to know.
Did you work with, you worked with wines before?
Yeah.
Okay.
So at the start of my career, I started at Diageo. Diageo used to have a beautiful wine portfolio. And so I worked in a sales and marketing capacity at Diageo. And so part of my responsibility was to sell and market their wine and spirit portfolio. And my very first, what they call crush camp, which basically is harvest, was in 2012 in Napa.
Okay.
And that was basically a course that they provided to employees that were interested in learning more. And I was like, oh my God, I want to do it. And it was so eye-opening to see the process of harvest and to participate in it. And I think that was the moment that I like almost this love affair began, right? And so fast forward to a few years ago where I then did harvest here in Stellenbosch. And I was like, oh my God, this is what I'm supposed to be doing.
That in
this is what I'm supposed to be doing. But I think I always like to make sure that I clarify I'm a wine negotiant. So I'm still in the business of wine. I didn't go to school for winemaking. However, I put myself through school of harvest. I put myself through school of sitting with winemakers and talking to them and learning from them and just being at wine farms as much as I possibly can.
Right.
And so I think that for me was the start. The start was learn. Don't come in thinking you know everything. and be willing to be a 20-year vet who's starting from day one.
Right.
So even though I'm a 20-year vet,
There's a vulnerability to that.
there's a vulnerability to that, but
Yeah.
that's where the unlock is.
Yeah.
The vulnerability is what really unlocks what you need to have your toolkit to do something like this.
Right.
And so I've been blessed to have people who were willing to pour into me, to teach me. You know, one of the really important things was that we were producing great wine, that we were partnering with a great winery and a winemaker. And so I took time to do a lot of research around who would make sense to work with, who would allow us to scale. We're building this to be a big global brand. And I think oftentimes for Black and brown founders, there's this notion that we have these small businesses.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's not a small business, it's an emerging
global
business,
brand.
and it's in
Yeah.
a global brand. And so I took
Its stature is global already.
Thank you.
So
I feel like that too, you know. And so I did a lot of work around, you know, how do I approach this the way I approached running big brands. I never scaled down the thinking. I never scaled down.
minimized.
Never. And even when people say, you know, a small business, I'm like, no, we're an emerging business.
Yeah. We're on our way to somewhere.
Yeah, you know, and I poured all of myself. Like I became very isolated. My friends, my family will tell you, lot of sacrifice. But I was so focused on building this the right way and doing it with integrity and love and, you know, all those things, which is where the women on my team come in, you know, 6 Black women who all have equity in the brand. That was so important to me because in the 20 years of building things,
You'd never owned it.
I never owned anything. And I built some cool stuff. I built some big brands. And I wanted to make sure that I was building something that the women that have been side by side with me on this journey also have equity, because this is their brand too.
I love that.
You know, I couldn't have done this
Without
by
them.
myself. And I always tell people 1% of something great is better than 100% of something just okay.
You're literally like,
Yeah.
I always say that, and Kami's in the studio behind the scenes. And I always say that I'm like, if it's 0% of 100% is 0%.
Right, right. And so I think I also want to serve as an example of how you do that. Founders can build brands and businesses that have equity models, and you don't need to be worried that you're giving too much or losing control. Of course, it's business, right? So it needs to be done the right way. But part of the joy of my life is that my legacy will be that I helped create equity opportunities for people who look like me. I didn't allow the fact that I never had anyone say, I'd love to give you some equity in what I'm building. And they could have.
They were many opportunities.
They could have, but I didn't allow that to keep me from them using it as an opportunity to do it for these beautiful young women who believe in me, believe in my dream. They've been on this journey. It's a wild journey, and they've been right there with me. So there was a lot that went into this.
Yeah.
A lot of heart, a lot of soul.
We can tell. I actually tasted your wine for the first time in New York, interestingly, at the Makosa store opening in Soho. And, you know, typically, you know, they'll be pouring different liquid or whatever. And I had to, I was like, oh, okay. I'm like, me and this brand we're connecting.
Yeah, we've been circling
We've been
other.
circling each other, and to be sitting in studio like this with you and to really just get the full story is really empowering. Yeah. But I think by design, corporate, this is why entrepreneurship is such a beautiful landscape, isn't it? Because it allows you to shape, even as you're building, like you're saying, a global brand, it allows you to shape it in whatever way that you want. Right. Because corporate by design, I think, is not designed for ownership. They are the owners of the corporates, and entrepreneurship really then opens us up to avenues of being able to first own and then share the ownership.
Yeah, I think one thing I want to say about that, what corporate benefits from people like you and I is that even though we're working for someone, we work like entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
We give our full self. Everything that I ever touched, everyone now is like, oh, we get it.
Yeah.
there was nothing that I never felt or approached in a way that wasn't my own. If that was my job and that was my brand and that was my thing to build, I actually built it the same way with the same energy that I
Yeah.
built IBest Wines. And so oftentimes, those of us who have an entrepreneur spirit, we're pouring that into these corporations anyway. And so I think the one thing that I like to say to people is like, if you could just take an ounce of what you're giving to companies for, in some instances, 5, 10, 15, 20 years,
Yeah.
and think about the thing that you would want to do for yourself. You
And
just have to
start.
unlock that
And
courage.
start.
You have to start. You just have
Yeah.
to start.
Yeah. I
Mm-hmm.
get that. And I think one other interesting thing that you said was you're an emerging business, but you're building a global brand.
Absolutely.
Um, and I have always been of that sentiment in that even when we were a business of 4 or 5, we conducted ourselves as a big business.
Absolutely.
And it's so important to just it actually short circuits so much of the journey
Yeah.
to building the business, because I think it reads as a globally minded business.
Yeah.
And so we are, for example, 17 years into the marketing agency now.
Congratulations.
And thank you.
That's a big deal.
That's a big
That's
deal.
a big deal.
And only after 17 years, the awards are starting to come and we're getting the recognition. But I always share the story how I've had to open and close the business multiple times for it to
Yeah.
become the business that it is now.
You can't be afraid to fail.
Yeah.
Like, I've had so many, the truth is, there have been so many no's. I have had people say, no, the price point's too high. No, the South African region isn't a region necessarily that people are looking for. I've had people say, you invested all your capital in this? Are you crazy? Like, I've heard all the things, but I am not afraid to fail.
Yeah.
And failure isn't even what I'm thinking about. That's the other thing, right? It's not even what I'm thinking about. The only thing I think about is doing great work and winning.
That's it.
You know,
Because greatness is who you are. It's not what
just
you
who
do.
you are, right? And
not
it
what
is a
you do.
mindset. If you lead with thinking about failure, you likely are going to
You've
fail.
failed already.
You've already failed because your mindset is in a failure mindset. But if you have an abundance mindset, a winning mindset,
Yes, girl.
then you really are unstoppable.
That's why I'm saying I always love those nuggets that you post in between your posts. Like they really, like there's days where I'm just like, ugh. And sometimes I'll pick up on something like that. And it really is the thing that, like, there's just a strong and a very clear spirit about the work that you do. And it's almost palpable even through the posts, interestingly, because, and just, I've seen you just this year, because I guess I've paid greater focus to your work this year. I'm like, okay. And consistency. Can we talk about the importance of consistency?
Yeah. Consistency is a superpower. It's a muscle. It's actually a muscle that you must develop, that you must develop a good relationship with consistency. I think the difference between good leaders and great leaders is that they are consistent. They are clear that consistency is a path to really doing things exceptionally. Excellence and consistency go together. They are connected. And so I am always reminding my mentees, the areas that you find yourself not being consistent in are the areas that are likely impacting everything in your life. And so I'm a big advocate of consistency and also just being transparent, right? Because I think oftentimes people are so worried about being fully in their real, being fully in who they are. And they're very consistent in figuring out how to not be transparent, where they should be consistent in being consistently transparent.
Open. Yeah.
And there's, again, a muscle and a superpower that lives in consistency and transparency. And that really is what sets a lot of great leaders apart from just okay. They're not okay, but leaders that maybe aren't as exceptional.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also just the sustainability. You spoke about legacy.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's legacy to, I suppose, legacy for me really captures the act of being consistent,
Mm-hmm.
because you can't be doing multiple things. You must
Mm-hmm.
have been consistent over a long period of time. So I
Yeah.
absolutely love that. So in terms of the business model, so as a
Mm-hmm.
wine negociant, like the business model of wine, what makes it profitable?
That's a great question. And what I will tell you is the wine and spirits business is a business that requires a lot of capital. So to do this, you have to have, to do it the right way,
Mhm.
you have to have a considerable amount of capital, or at least some level of support.
Right.
Again, I'm building to scale. I'm building to be a big global brand. So my business model was based on that. And a lot of it sits in the numbers, right?
Yeah.
You have to understand the business part of it. What are your margins? What does it cost for you to transport wine around the world? What does it cost when something may go wrong? Because
Right.
things
The
go
risk.
wrong, right? There's risk. And so I've been really blessed. I have an incredible finance lead on my team. Her name is Chanel Floyd. And
Shout out Chanel.
shout out to Chanel, she built the business model from the ground up for IBest Wines. We had a lot of advisory, and I do have 5 advisors on my team as well, business advisors, people who are sitting just watching what we're doing and supporting us in the process.
Love that.
I think one of the most important and most valuable pieces to making this a profitable business and is making sure that you have people that are doing the oversight. And so Chanel leans into those people all the time to say, does this make sense? Do these scenarios make sense? I think before you can even get
You gotta love financial modeling.
listen, and before you can even get to profits and revenue, it's, do you have models that support great, just okay, and may need to think about this again, right?
Yeah.
There's different ways that things can go, right? Economy plays a big role in how brands are received and how they're able to launch and grow. And so it can be a very profitable business, but it can also be a business that you take losses in.
Initially, losses initially, or
I think initially, obviously, I wouldn't call them losses because you're investing and building into something.
Right.
But you have to have a good runway of capital to get you through that 18 months, that 24 months, that 3 year. And so I think a lot of people see the finished product and they're like, I want to be in wine, I want to be in spirits. I decided to do this because I am a 20-year veteran. And so I came equipped with a lot of the things and experiences that let me do this at a high level.
Right.
I think my advice to people who are looking into getting into wine and spirits is you have to go back to school. And it doesn't necessarily mean in the traditional way. You can, but you got to find your people that are willing to be your mentors, your advisors, people that are going to really, really help you understand this business.
Yeah.
And I say that because again, it's a beautiful business. It's a fun business.
Yeah.
But
We just see the sexy part. And
there's a lot of
I
nights.
saw you. What were you wearing in Cape Town? What was that white looking?
So I was doing some research actually around olives and olive oil, because that's a whole other industry that South Africa is
leading
superpower.
in. Yes.
And so I'm very interested and intrigued in olive oil. But when you're in the facilities, in order to make sure that things remain sterile,
got it.
you have to make sure that you wear those kind of sterile outfits. I've done that all over the world. When I worked for vodkas, when I worked for tequilas, when you go into those labs, you have to be covered. But you make a great point. A lot of people see this.
Yeah.
I got my makeup done this morning. I ironed my clothes. But on average, I'm sitting with a headscarf on, with a t-shirt and some sweats, and I'm getting to it. And I like to really stress that piece, is that you have to have the right people, the right team, good advisors. Your business plan has to be solid, and you have to be patient. It takes time. It took 3 years to build this. I would say I was able to do it a bit faster than most, but I had 20 years under my belt. You know, so I know a lot of people that say, I want to launch a brand. And I'm like, well, then you have to have a lot of patience. You have to find your team, right? Teams are critical.
Yeah.
And you have
Surround
to
yourself with the right people.
Yeah, and you have to develop a great product. You know?
That first and foremost.
Yeah, you have to develop a great
because
product.
it's not just the liquid that's inside, it's the bottle,
It's bottle,
it's the branding,
it's the branding,
it's the marketing,
it's the
distribution.
trademarking, it's all the legal fees, it's everything. It's my travel when I have to go from the US to South Africa and back 3 times, maybe 4 times a year. It's the product that maybe doesn't work out, the bottle that breaks, the cork, that whatever. It's all these things. And so I always like to just tell people, you have to get a mastery of what you're doing. And even back to my earlier point, I had been in this industry 20 years, but I went back to school.
But you've got to love the genesis of a thing. There's that scripture that says, don't despise small beginnings. And to come from a big corporation and be willing to go small because your ego could have stood in the way to say, girl, I have worked on Ciroc and Moet Hennessy and all of that, but I love somebody, and I have a respect for somebody that's willing to go back to the genesis of a thing.
And to become a student. Right? I am enjoying being a student again because I'm learning and I'm working towards mastery, and that excites me. And so I think the biggest advice is people need to make sure that they're willing to learn. And you got to it before I did, but you can't. This is egoless work,
girl. You've got to purge yourself.
Listen,
daily.
You know, and there are battles daily, and there are tears typically daily, and there are things that make me uncomfortable daily. But you know, Fawn Weaver said to me, she's the founder of Uncle Nearest, she said, entrepreneurs have a different heartbeat. And so you have to make sure that you have the right heart to be an entrepreneur at this level. And that's expensive too.
That's a cost. Like
there's a cost for
there's
that
a sweat
too.
capital.
There's a sweat capital
that's never quite valuated, is it?
No. That would actually be a beautiful case study to actually see what is the value of the sweat equity that the average entrepreneur that's working to build $1 billion company. I'm working to build this to be $1 billion company. That's how we close the wealth gap in our communities. What is the value of that sweat equity? And how much time did that entrepreneur really have to put in, and the teams around them have to put in? And so I think that's part of the complete value chain when you're thinking about.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think there's a big missing part there. To the academics and the business schools that are listening, here's a business case.
Yes, exactly.
Here's a business case. So in terms of world wine production, I think you've already alluded to this, that South Africa, in fact, is the only African wine producing country worldwide. And it ranks as the 7th in overall volume production of wine. We produce 3.9%, which may seem small, but 3.9% of the world's wine. This is as of 2023. And the South African wine industry enjoys a positive, consistent trajectory despite sort of what's happening economically, or, you know, and globally, global challenges. What, you know, is some of the research that went into you producing? I think you've already sort of touched on this, but like specifically, like what were the pros for and against Napa versus producing in South Africa?
Yeah, so I think obviously if I would have decided to do Napa, the one obvious pro is I live in Los Angeles. It's a 30-minute flight, right? So just pure distance and time. I could have gone back and forth and done that from a travel perspective, a fraction of the cost of what it cost me just purely to travel here, to be here, to actually be with my hands in the soil. But I know I made the right decision. I think another big part for me around the research and my why was, again, if you look at other places in the world, they're very familiar with South African wine and the region.
But not the US, you said.
Not the US as much. When you talk to sommeliers and, really wine aficionados, they're familiar with South African wine, but the average US consumer is not.
Okay.
When you say to them, did you know that there was a wine region in South Africa? They're like, there is? They do not know.
Yeah.
And this is not just any wine region. This is one of the most beautiful wine regions in the world,
And parts of the world.
producing some of the best wine in the world and celebrated wine. And so for me, I did a lot of research in the US surveying just stores. And I'll give you a perfect example. The average, whether it be small wine shop to large major retailer, does not have a South African wine section. So you have everything. You have Napa, you have Chile, you have New
Spanish
Zealand, you have,
wines.
you name it. And they're categorized and they have their sign and it says the country. And the average, over 70% of the stores that we did research in did not have a South African wine section, oftentimes only had two varietals represented, Pinotage and Chenin Blanc. Oftentimes the wines were old. They had been in these stores for a long time. So even if a consumer came in to purchase the wine, they're probably not getting the best experience. You had a lot of old baggage from wines that were maybe making it into the US at a certain point that maybe weren't but the best wines.
That
They
just
weren't
sat
quality
in the
wines. They
market
just
as well.
sat.
Okay.
And then I think the other piece of it is when I looked at my peer group of wine brand owners in the US, none of them were doing South Africa. They were doing Napa, they were doing Italy, they were doing France, they were doing the regions that, in my opinion, were kind of expected for them to do. And so this is a departure from what my peer group was doing. And that excited me. I've had many of them say to me, brilliant of you to look at South Africa and to launch wine from South Africa. We also did focus groups.
Okay.
And so we did a lot of focus groups and we just asked people did you know? And 90% of the answers were no. If they did know, again, they knew about Pinotage. They didn't know where they could necessarily buy a South African wine. They hadn't seen a South African wine on the menu by the glass. So there were some clear indicators that there was an opportunity. And so we used all that research to inform our thesis on why IBest Wines had a place and could be disruptive in the market. And so a lot of research. I mean, we didn't just, hey, South Africa's cool, let's do this. I think the other research we did was we looked at what was happening in fashion. We looked at what was happening in music. We looked at what is happening in film. I mean, this is a hub for filmmaking.
Yeah.
And said, okay, we're looking at all the areas that drive culture. No one is doing it in wine and spirits. Why? It's such a big part of entertainment and culture.
Right.
And so for me, it was just a natural yes. I was like, this is it. This is a great thesis for a business. And but that took time, And then I think understanding that and kind of debunking the myth that it's really difficult to get wine from South Africa into the US. I mean, the same process.
Was that a barrier, from a logistic or distribution point of view?
I think most people say to me, oh my God, is the importing and exporting expensive? How are you doing it? I think for some reason people think that the process is any different than if you're doing it in Italy or you're doing it in France, or for that matter, if you're taking wines from Napa and selling them globally, it's the same process.
Got it.
But I do think that there are some inherent prejudices and beliefs around how you do business and how you navigate business in Africa when it comes to US. And so that's also what I hope this brand represents to people, is that, no, we actually can do business fluidly.
Correct.
And just a week ago, the mayor of Atlanta was in Cape Town and is working on this agreement with South Africa to do business. And so I think more Americans like myself are just trying to make sure that we're a voice for you should be doing business on the continent. And you don't have to water it
We're
down.
open for business world.
Yeah, you know, you don't
wide
have to water it
open.
down. And it is a luxury business. This is a luxury wine brand.
Yeah.
And we stand up to the best of the best. We have a plan to be next to all the big brands that people know, whether they be wine or spirits, and we're already doing that. The joy for me is when I walk into an event and there's like Hennessy and other brands, and then there's like IBest Wines, and I'm like, see,
In good company.
we're in good company, right? We are building an icon.
Yeah.
And so a lot of work went into landing on this, but it was a no-brainer. South Africa produces award-winning wine. We've won awards already. We won at the New York International Wine Competition. We won Producer of the Year. We've won golds for both blends. And we were just included in Wine Enthusiast's Best of 2024.
Congratulations.
So,
If I had a
yeah.
glass, we would be
We was
toasting,
clean,
right?
I know. But, you know, it's the belief and the education, you know? And so when most people hear me talk, they're like, wow, we didn't know. And I'm like, yeah, just
That
do some
education part,
research.
so important.
The education part is so important. And so we are very proud to represent the South African wine region. And again, I think I like to make this point. I didn't discover the South African wine region, nor am I claiming that I did, but I'm proud to represent it.
Yeah, you're repping it good,
You know
girl.
what I mean? I'm proud to represent it. And so, and there are some brilliant winemakers and wine brands coming out of South Africa as well. And so I'm hoping that I'm opening up doors that maybe weren't open before,
Right.
so that these winemakers also have a platform in the US. Because my goal is to walk into those same stores that we researched, and there's a sign that says South Africa, and there are all these brands, because there are enough brands coming from South Africa to fill a shelf.
Girl, you've got the key. We've given you the
Yeah.
key. You've got the
Thank
key
you.
to the city.
Thank you.
Just use it to unlock, as you're saying, the US for the South African wines. And we've got some wines here. So,
Yes.
what are the varieties that you produce, and what informed the choices of the two?
Yeah. So very deliberate. I love this question. The white blend is three varietals. It's
Varietals
Chardonnay,
of grapes.
varietals
Okay.
of grapes. So Chardonnay dominant, Chenin Blanc, and Sauvignon Blanc. So there are three different varietals in the white blend. We were deliberate with that. We wanted to show the breadth of wine coming from South Africa because, again, in our focus groups, what we found was people knew about one, maybe two. They knew about Pinotage and they knew about Chenin Blanc. And we want people to know instantly when you pick up a bottle of IBest Wines, wow, these
tasted.
these varietals are coming from South Africa. And then the same with the red blend.
What is in the red?
It's Cab Dominant, Petite Syrah, Shiraz, and Malbec.
Oh, wow.
And again,
you can do that?
absolutely.
Chemistry girl.
Yes, art.
Yes.
The art of winemaking.
Craftsmanship.
And so, you know, these two blends
beautiful.
represent a really quick education on the breadth of wine coming from South Africa. And I'll tell you the number of people that send us emails, write reviews, and say, we didn't know. We just didn't know that all that wine was coming from South Africa. And there's many more varietals that come from the region. And so we are really proud that these two sisters, I call them sisters,
Love that.
really represent a quick education on,
Just
you know, the diversity of
that the
the
region
wine coming.
offers.
Absolutely, absolutely. So very proud of them.
And what, any expansion plans in the range?
Yes. So we are working on a rosé. Actually, part of why I was here was to sit with the winemaker, talk about kind of the taste profiles. We had been talking about it a lot on Zoom, but it's nothing like being in the lab. And so we've landed on something that I feel really good about, but we always take wine. We do focus groups. We like people to try it. I'll actually have you guys participate in a focus group here.
Yes,
We do
ma'am.
them here as well.
Okay, amazing.
Because I don't like to make these decisions in a silo. For me, this is a brand that represents the new wine drinker, the seasoned wine
There's
drinker.
community to this brand.
Absolutely.
I think just from everything you've said about how you founded it
Mm-hmm.
to who you partnered with or collaborated with in forming it,
Yeah.
I love the strong sense of
Community is at the
community.
center of what we do. And it was really the art community that influenced my ability to bring my dream to life.
Yeah.
You know, I literally was like, go create.
Yeah, because art and wine pervade each other, don't
Listen,
they?
there's a beautiful marriage
They're
between
so
art and wine.
beautiful.
Those are two things that I love. I love the art community. I love the wine community. I love that this brand sits at the center of both of those communities. It's been beautiful to support the art community with the wine. So wine openings, exhibit openings, museums, you name it.
The wine is
wine's been
certainly
there.
in the right spaces.
Yeah.
And actually, let's talk a little bit about that because you mentioned earlier, serving wine by the glass. And I've always wondered what is the process of selecting, because they'll typically have a house wine, restaurants, and then they'll have wines that are available by the glass. Is that a deliberate action at trial, at encouraging trial?
Yes.
And also just getting the wine listed even within restaurant wine lists. Is that a journey that...
Yeah. So so the abbreviated term for by the glass is BTG.
Okay.
Brands want by the glass placements because it allows people to try, right? So it is a recruitment opportunity. It's a visibility opportunity because you're on the menu, your name is there, people can read it. And then also it's a velocity play. If you're by the glass, people are oftentimes ordering by the glass, right? So it helps you with your velocity and your sales.
Okay.
And so
So is that a preferred...
yes.
It's preferred to the bottle sales.
By the glass and by the bottle, I would say by the glass is always something that because most people are trying a glass or having a glass before they maybe venture into a bottle.
Right.
And especially as a new brand, consumers are more likely to try a glass of something that they're not familiar with than to buy a bottle.
Right.
And so you build to that, right? You get them familiar by enjoying it by the glass. And then eventually they go to places and they say, I see this wine that I liked and it's by the bottle and I want the bottle. So by the glass is certainly something.
And then in retail, so does restaurant consumption by the glass help the retail sales?
Absolutely.
Ultimately, because then that you can never buy a glass in retail.
Right, right. So both worlds, on and off premise, play off of each other. So if you're in a restaurant and you have a glass of wine, you know, you're more, and you enjoy it as a consumer, more likely than not, when you walk into your retail store and you're like, oh, I had that glass of wine, right? Because it's also attached to a good time.
Yeah.
So if you and I are sitting, dining,
celebration,
we have a great
there's
meal,
occasion.
There's an occasion. And then you see that same thing that sat in the center of your occasion at a retail store, you're more apt to say, I had a great time with my girls off this bottle of wine. And so you need both. You need a healthy mix of both. But then online is also a very big driver. People are shopping online all the time.
Yeah.
So we are trying to establish our online presence. We actually launched the brand online in the U.S., sold out in the first 6 hours.
What?
And we were able to take that data from all the states that ordered. The average ring included both of the SKUs, so we knew there was an appetite for both. It helped us validate our pricing. Okay, we're at a price point where people are willing to buy. So online is also an important channel as well.
Where did you launch actually when you launched the wine? Did you launch in South Africa or in the US?
I launched in the US first.
Okay.
And then I quickly followed up because I said, well, there's no way that this wine is from South Africa and I'm launching in the US and you can't, like, that makes no sense. It makes me uncomfortable, you know?
Yeah.
And then we launched in Cape Town at a beautiful art gallery called Southern Guild, who I've become very close with the owners. They also are the first South African gallery in Los Angeles. So they have a Cape Town location,
of course.
and they have a location in Los Angeles. And so we work together actually with Rich Mency. Rich Mency co-hosted the opening with me at Southern Guild. Yes.
I'm wearing Rich Missy today.
I know. And so it was a beautiful opening, small, intimate. And we are now starting to build the brand here in South Africa. The last year has been heavily focused on the US. And now, luckily we're able to say, okay, how do we set ourselves up? We're now in Liquor City here.
I was gonna ask actually where you're retailing in South Africa.
So Liquor City was the first outlet to say, absolutely, we want this brand. So shout out to Liquor City.
Shout out.
We are in, I think, 6 or 7 stores in Johannesburg, 2 stores in Pretoria, 2 stores in Cape Town. I'm missing something, and 2 stores in Durban.
Okay. I'm from Durban, and Durban is always last to receive these things. Thank you for
Yes.
repping my city.
Yes, we are in 2 stores there. And so we're also working to just expand our retail footprint, our footprint in restaurants. I think the hardest thing for me is if I could be in 2 places at one time, I would. I can't.
Yeah.
So it's also setting up a team here that can do the work while me and the team are doing the work in the US, and then vice versa. The goal is for me to split my time. So half of the year I'm in the US, half of the year I'm here. Because it's important to me to not just be a brand that's here on the retail shelves, but that there is some connectivity to me as the founder.
Correct.
And then we also just launched in Ghana.
Yeah, just in time for Afrofuture, just in time for the season. The season.
So we're very excited about that.
That's exciting.
And we have a great distributor in Ghana who said yes to us that distributes other really big brands. So it's a bit of a deja vu for me, because some of the brands in their portfolio are brands that I worked on for many years.
Oh my.
So super excited and proud of that. We are working on opening up Paris and London and Canada and the Caribbean.
Yeah.
So the goal is very clear, and the ambition is very clear, to be a global brand. And again, to represent the South African wine region at the highest level.
We love that.
Yeah.
We love that for us and for you.
Thank you.
What are some of your favorite South African wines?
Yeah, so
You were speaking about Brookdale Estate.
Brookdale Estates, yeah, Kiera. She actually, shout out to Kiera. She's a beautiful young winemaker who I got a chance to meet last year, or earlier this year, actually. And she just won Winemaker of the Year for, I think, Diners Club.
the
Yep,
Platters.
Diners Club.
Yeah.
So shout out to Kiera. Keep doing your thing. She's a lovely young woman, and she's making beautiful wines. There is a young winemaker. Her name is Haley September. She is actually one of my mentees. She will be announcing soon. She's basically accepted her first winemaking job at a winery. So I'm going to let her announce that. I don't want to do it.
In South Africa? She's South African?
In South Africa, yeah. She's from Saldanha. And I got a chance to meet her while doing Harvest a few years ago. And I'm basically mentoring her on the business side, and she's there side by side whenever I'm tasting wines. And it's beautiful to see her journey from student. She's been a student at Stellenbosch University, and she's just wrapping up her master's. She's going to go to the PhD program.
Yeah.
And so I'm very excited about Haley September's future. I love Terrestrial Wines, Barine. Her name is Barine. She's a winemaker. She's incredible. Carmen Stevens, incredible wines. I actually participated in Harvest with Carmen as well. Asalina is one of my favorite wines from South Africa.
Selena.
One of my favorite, and the founder is truly a pioneer. And there's also a winemaker named Rutger. Rutger. I always pronounce his name wrong. Sorry, Rutger. You know I love you. You're my brother. But I had the pleasure of doing Harvest with him. He was the winemaker at Start Conde. He has now branched off. He's working on his own brand that he's launching soon. But he's also someone to look out for.
Okay.
But there are so many.
I love that there's so many women on your list
Oh, yeah.
of favorites, because I think spoiled for choice here, and I also love that they are young, emerging women in the industry.
that are doing their thing.
Am I correct in saying winemakers are to the industry what creative directors are to fashion?
Yeah, you could say, or what artists are to art.
Okay.
You know, winemakers, this is a form of art. And what they do, the passion, the love, the science.
The science, the chemistry.
The science. And also, I think, the connectivity with nature. You have to be a person that actually loves being in those vineyards when it's cold and it's raining and the vines look like they're gone and then they come back to life, and just this process
All
that
the
the vineyards
elements.
go through. I think, I have such respect for winemakers. So yeah, you could say creative directors, artists.
Okay. I just
Yeah.
needed to land properly for me. And how have your wines? You said you launched in the US. Overall, how has the reception been?
It's been amazing. And I will tell you that the display of community love and support is something that is from God. The level of community support that we have received, not just in the US, but here as well, and all over the world. That's how we were able to open up in Ghana, right? That's how we're already doing events in places like Paris, doing Basel, is because the community has said yes to IBest Wines. I think community has said yes to the type of founder and leader that I strive to be, someone who is so rooted in community. And so the reception has been fantastic. We could not have done it with genuine support. Our sales are doing really, really well for a year one brand.
Yeah.
Our placements in the US, we've landed some big retailers. We've also landed some airline placements. So we will be on American Airlines international flights.
Because that's
starting
also
April.
a good place.
Absolutely. Airlines, cruises, outlets like Disney, big resorts. That's where big volume comes from. Again, go to school, do your work, do your research so you know. But and so it's been really a blessing for us to see. But it really, at the end of the day, boils down to the wine. These are award-winning wines. They're beautiful wines. It's a beautiful story. And there's no gimmicks. It's just what you see is what you get, you know?
Because what do you sustain then if it's just a gimmick?
Right, right.
But also just, a dream whose time has come.
Right.
So
exactly.
I think then everyone garners the kind of support that your wines have received. And how has your personal story just shaped the positive sentiment of the wine, like the brand's tonality? There's like an overall positive sentiment that even as you speak, even as we see, sort of your interviews, how has your personal story, especially being a Black and Latina woman, shaped that or enriched that?
Yeah, so I think it goes back to, I mentioned it earlier, I had a beautiful career, but I never owned anything. No one ever offered me to own anything, and nor was I bullish enough to say, hey, I'm building this thing. How do I become a part of the ownership? And it's okay. The thing that I like to say to everyone is, if you can take one thing from me, is that I didn't let that make me bitter. I wasn't angry about that. I those 20 years, that career was incredible. And now I am able to do all the things that that I want to do, and do them with a lot of soul and a lot of passion. And this brand is about a feeling of, a feeling of love and courage and artistry. And
we get that sense very strongly.
Yeah. And I want people to feel inspired. You can never have a glass of IBest Wines, but IBest Wines should inspire you to dream and to be courageous and to do things with integrity.
Love that.
Yeah.
You collect art as well?
I do.
And who are some of your favorite artists? I know we share a fave, Nelson Makamo, who I also have in my collection.
Makamo is one of my favorites. He's such a brilliant artist.
Such a brilliant,
good and a visionary. And I'm so proud to say I actually was part of the team that brought Nelson to the U.S. to do his first U.S. show, Blue. I was working on a brand at the time, and the brand basically sponsored and powered the entire show in Los Angeles. And
was this post the Time magazine cover?
Yeah, this was a few years ago.
Okay.
And it was so beautiful to watch the community in Los Angeles embrace his first U.S. show. He has a lot of U.S. collectors. He's
Yeah,
celebrated
he's
all over the
collected
world.
in the higher echelons of.
Yeah, but it's
Shout out to Matzila too
yeah,
and the work that she
yeah.
does with him.
Marcella is incredible. I actually was texting with her yesterday. She has a new space at right at 44 Stanley, and is a brilliant, just human. Like she gets
She's
it.
beautiful.
Yeah, and so artists have been a huge inspiration to this brand. There's some other South African artists. Stefan Lenga, he's an up and coming artist. Trevor Sturman
Yes.
is, I would say, one of the people that inspires me the most.
He is just
He is a visionary. He is creative excellence.
truly.
We have not yet seen what Trevor Sturman is going to do. And I love him. He's a huge support to me. And so he's another one. Cynthia Malanga is another young artist who I really, really love. I love the work that she's doing. And again, one of those artists that you're just excited to see what they're doing. And then Lulama.
Lama Wolf.
Yes.
Love Lulama Wolf.
I love Lulama Wolf. I love her work. I love the fact that she commands the space of abstract art. When, art sometimes says, give me figurative, she's doing, abstract. And I love that.
And I love also how she's managed to transcend art with her work.
Yeah, what she's done with her H&M collab, with her Bang of Lucen collab.
Love of the BNO.
I love her, and I love her energy. She has a beautiful energy. So I could go on and on. As you can tell,
girl.
I'm a big fan
Avid.
of the art world, and all of the artists that I named are artists that have hyper influenced, the way that I approached bringing IBest Wines to life. In my mind, it was this blank canvas, and it was like, go paint, girl. Go come back with your masterpiece. And so shout out to all the artists in the world who have the courage to create every single day.
Every time.
Every time.
They truly are creatives. And how did you then achieve this beautiful blend between art, culture, and sort of wine?
Yeah. So when I resigned from my last actual corporate gig, it probably took about 6 months, and all I did was go to art galleries and travel and go to art studios and go in people's homes and see how they were creating art. And while I was learning and researching the wine, I was spending so much time connected to artists. And I wanted to just be in that essence,
that
and
energy
that energy
of
and watching an artist have an easel, a paintbrush, the canvas,
whatever medium they use,
very small spaces, and just going to work. And what it did for me and my soul was it made me really anchor in, you will create this. It's going to seem hard. It will be daunting, but you will go from paintbrush and blank canvas to actually a masterpiece and something beautiful.
And to appreciate the process.
And to really appreciate the process.
Yeah, because to fast track the process, you can't.
You cannot cheat the process.
Because art is temperamental as well. So important to appreciate the process.
Yeah. And sometimes you got to put it down and come back to it.
Yeah.
So the process of landing on these blends was a year long. I would say a few more % of cab and a little less of this, and I'm, in the lab and doing all the things, and then I'd come back to it. And I say, I don't know, it's not
maturing right.
Yeah, it's not there yet, And so I took a lot from the artist process and the way that I approached building IBest Wines, and I also took a lot from the patience that you have to have. This idea that you're just going to throw paint on this canvas and every day 5 and 6 and different things, like that's not everybody's story. Some artists do produce at high level. That's their story. But it really just anchored me in, I think, the temperament and the energy that you have to have when you are trying to create something that is art. So art and wine are also the two things that I love. So it's just a beautiful marriage, you know. And
You're doing your
again,
favorite things.
yeah, I'm doing my favorite things all the time. You know what I'm saying?
Who needs to work?
Yeah, you know, it's like the saying, you know, do what you love is true.
Yeah.
I'm really doing what I love. My brand is being poured in places that I love to go to. My brand is connected to communities that I'm a part of. And so I really am doing what I love, and I'm living my dream. Yeah.
I really needed this conversation now.
Good.
So thank you so much for
Yeah.
just also pouring into me
Yes.
and onto this platform and everybody that will get to see or listen to this episode, because, you know, like the sense of community around the wine, as I've mentioned, but also just community ownership, like people feel like it's their own. I love that. I love that it's a new brand, but it feels like it's got such heritage behind it.
Thank you. That means a lot to me.
Yeah, it
Thank
feels like
you.
it's got so much heritage behind it. And we'll sit 10 years from now or however long from now, and, you know, it'll just continue to become more of, it'll settle into itself. So I really wish you all of the very best on this
Thank you
journey.
so much.
And we love these words that you live by. You say, be clear in your vision, bold in your ideas, and deliberate in your execution. But most importantly, be good to people along the way.
Yeah.
And with that, I want to pose this question. What is your ultimate luxury?
Ooh, freedom.
Mm.
Yeah, my ultimate luxury, I realize now, is without the courage to take the leap, to do the thing, I wouldn't have had the freedom to do it. Right. And so I find that freedom is just such a valuable luxury
Yeah.
that we sometimes take for granted. You know, the freedom to sit across from one another and have this conversation
Yeah.
is so valuable. And then I would say, from a tangible thing, art and wine.
Quite like literally like
Yeah. Yeah.
you
Art and wine are the two things that
you get to enjoy your two luxuries.
yeah,
those two luxuries
those
every
are
day.
two luxuries that I am so grateful that I get to enjoy. They are two luxuries that I'm excited to hand down. My art collection is being built for my son and my grandson. This business is being built for a legacy for the women that have equity in the business, and for obviously my son and my grandson. And so, yeah, my two favorite luxuries are art and wine. Yeah.
Love that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was so good to be here.
This has been beautiful in every sense.
Thank you.
And yeah, you fly out tonight?
I fly home just in time for holiday so I can spend some time with my family and sit still a bit. You know, I've been building, and I'm going to give myself the gift of rest,
Of stillness.
yeah, the gift of stillness, and the gift of, I think,
And replenishment.
replenishment, yeah, and mental, spiritual, and physical preparation for a new year.
Yeah. It's going to be a big year.
Yeah, it's going to be a big,
good
beautiful year.
It's going to be a good year.
Yeah, despite what everyone's trying to tell us about the year
No,
ahead of us.
we're not going to focus on that, because we're not just moving, we're now flowing in the
Correct.
gifts and the spaces we should be
Correct,
occupying.
with an abundance mindset.
Absolutely.
So I'm very excited about this year, and I'm excited to come back and spend time with you again.
Yes.
And just thank you. Thank you for giving me the platform and the support. Entrepreneurs cannot build things without the support of other people. So thank you so much.
Thank you for accepting the invitation. It's been
Yes.
an absolute honor, really.
Thank you.
And I think, just like I said, the conversation that I needed.
Good.
It's calming to my nervous system.
Yes.
Peaceful to my soul. Thank you very much,
Thank
Ingrid.
you. Thank you.